Welcome to the Ranking Things podcast, the production of Jason Davis Voiceover. Please visit jasondavisvoice.com for information about voiceover services for commercials, internet and corporate videos, e-learning, phone messages, and more. I'm Jason Davis.
And I'm Eric Wright.
Each episode, we're going to choose a topic to rank, give our choices for our top 5, and then defend those choices. It's the podcast where you can be a part of the conversation. Please let us know what you think. Email us rankingpodcast@yahoo.com or tweet @JasonDavisVoice. Well, Eric, today we are going to discuss the top 5 toys from our childhood.
Yes, toys that we grew up with.
Yeah, and this is going to be an interesting podcast for people listening probably, because depending on how old you are, your answer is going to be very different. We've discussed in past podcasts our age difference. It's only a few years, but I'm curious to see if we grew up with some of the same toys or not. That'll be interesting.
I had friends who had money, so they had toys that I didn't.
Okay.
Economics may play into this too. With any of these lists, I always have to kind of impose some rules on myself.
Okay.
I had to make sure first, no games, no sports things. Like I had a basketball growing up that I had for years, and I played with it all the time in my backyard. I even drew eyes on it and did the whole thing. I didn't name it Wilson, but
I was just gonna say.
It was still, but that's a sports equipment, so I'm not counting that either.
Okay, so with that, what's your number 5 toy?
My number 5 toy was Lincoln Logs.
Okay.
I had it back in the day where there weren't all the plastic accoutrement like my kids did when they were small. Mm-hmm. They had all kinds of plastic doors and windows, and then they would have little plastic canoes and cowboys and all this other stuff. Mine was just the Lincoln Logs and a couple plastic roof pieces, and that was it.
I think it's very cool that both you and your kids played with Lincoln Logs.
Oh, yeah. And actually, we have a fair amount of toys, in common. Yeah, I mean, Lincoln Logs, I remember building a cabin and then learning how to make projectiles, which will be a common theme as we talk about other toys.
You are an architect. Were Lincoln Logs the precursor to you becoming an architect by any chance?
Maybe, because there were, I think, a lot of things. I was either going to be an architect or a stuntman when we look at our toys and how we played with them.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it was weird, yeah. The other thing was going to be eye doctor, but that never worked out. So that's my number 5. What was your number 5?
Number 5 for me was the $6 Million Man action figure.
Is that the one that you could look through the back of his head?
Indeed.
And he had an eye?
You look through the hole in the back of the head for the bionic eye. The skin rolled up on the arm and legs to reveal the bionic chips underneath, and the chips came out, which was pretty
freaky.
Cool. Yeah. $6 Million Man was a big show for me back then. It was on the air from March of 73 to March of 78. And I probably came in somewhere in the middle of that, is my guess, because I was pretty young when it first debuted, but then it was probably right up my alley after that. And I have very distinct memories of the show, too. Did you watch $6 Million Man when you were a kid or no?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay.
And it was a big thing to talk about the next day in school.
Oh, totally. My specific memories of the show itself that stand out: Andre the Giant as Sasquatch, and then there was a few episodes that were centered around fembots, where they were there was some sort of an evil scientist that created fembots to get into OSI, which was the organization that Steve Austin worked for.
Okay.
They made a fembot of Oscar Goldman's secretary.
Oh my God.
And the way that they revealed that it was a fembot, her face came off. And underneath her face was all this sort of circuitry and shit. Yeah. And
did they have golf balls for the eyes?
Yeah, it was really weird. It was really, and I remember as a kid being totally freaked out by that. It might have given me nightmares even.
Sure.
So I can see that. So that's a big memory of that show for me. It's really weird.
Well, it sounds pretty different than the Austin Powers. Those fembots. Right.
They were sort of designed to be sexy and to seduce him, but the fembots were totally evil on $6 Million Man. And then, of course, was the $6 Million Man spinoff, The Bionic Woman, January 76 to May of 78 with Lindsay Wagner. And I remember definitely having a crush on Lindsay Wagner as a kid.
Oh, yeah. 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 She and one of the bra models on the Sears catalog were my first loves. All right, we ready to go to 4?
Yes, we are. Go ahead.
All right, so my number 4 was the Kenner SSP Dragster with the T-stick.
Okay.
What that was, you look a little perplexed.
Okay, I'm wondering if that's the thing where it had the little I don't know what to call it, but it had the teeth on it, and you put it in and you pulled it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And the commercials were awesome because the commercials were like, yes, like, you hear that? Yeah, I hear that. And the voiceover guy is like, that's right, you're Dragster. You can crank it. You can crash it. And all this.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's awesome. I can crash it into walls and stuff. This is great. So, I got one. I was raised on a street with a bunch of other kids at different ages, but a lot of us got those at Christmas time, and we were going to each other's basements, playing with them, and they were fine. But then when the weather got nice and we went outside and we started like really putting these things to the test,
right,
we just beat the snot out of these things.
You can say shit. It's okay.
Yes, we are smashing against walls, and we were trying to make them go down ramps and things and all that. Yeah, they didn't last the whole summer. That was part of a really good summer.
I'm pretty sure I may have had at least one of those toys. If it wasn't the Dragster, I know that they had other vehicles too.
I think they had a motorcycle too.
Yeah, if I didn't have one of those, I definitely had friends that did, and I remember playing with them, and really they were a lot of fun too.
Oh yeah, and the noise they made was just it was just
awesome.
Cool.
Yep. Absolutely.
That was nice.
All right. Number 4 for me is Mattel Electronics Football.
The handheld thing?
Yep, little handheld thing.
With the little red lines.
Yep, the little blips. Very, very basic. But let me tell you something. Every kid had one of these games. It was either that or basketball, baseball, and then the very first one was Auto Race. And I had Auto Race too, and I forgot about that.
I did have that football one. And I just remember when playing it, that there was a ticking sound.
Yes. Yep.
Basically, you're just one player.
Right.
You're sort of like a running back.
Exactly.
And then there were 6 other blips in front of you.
Right.
You just had to sit there and wait for like a lane to open up.
That's right.
And then you fingered up and across.
That's right.
And then you go, and then you had to wait.
Yep.
For them to move again.
Mm-hmm. The cool thing is that before video games were really the thing, this is what you had, right?
Yeah.
They first came out in June of 1977. I did a little research on these, and they were sold through Sears. At first, Sears didn't think that they were going to be a big seller, so they kind of did a limited run. They stopped making them.
Okay.
And then within 6 months, they became so popular with kids that they ended up selling as many as 500,000 units a week by February of 1978. Now, at that time, I'm sure video games were available, but obviously handheld games, electronics, were became much bigger later with like the Game Boy from Nintendo and stuff like that.
Right.
But these things were great. And, you're talking about how you were just this blip that could run and you had to dodge. And then eventually they made Football 2 where you could actually pass too, which was pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
You know how they have catalogs that they usually send around Christmas time, before Christmas, and it's all kinds of real cool, either retro stuff or just, kind of like left of center stuff.
Oh, sure.
One of the catalogs had a version of this Mattel Electronics game, and when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, I remember that. I had that one as a kid. It was the greatest thing ever. It was amazing. Of course, my wife is so fucking cool. She bought me one for Christmas. It brings me right back when I play it.
Well, that definitely sounds a 70s-ish kind of toy.
No doubt.
Which I think is really where we are. We're talking 70s.
Yeah. Number 3. What was number 3 for you?
For me, Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
Oh,
do you remember those?
I do. I don't know if I had them, but I know I played them. They were awesome.
I got mine a while after all my friends did. It was just me, and I have a younger sister. And when I got it, we're playing with it. It's nice and mild. We're not overly jostling the whole thing around. You hit the chin, the head goes up. Oh, that's great. It was really fun. Well, once then I get with my friends, then it's a whole different thing, because now you're just kind of like smashing the thing back and forth at each other. It's like you're not even trying to move back and forth. You're not dodging. You're not punching or anything.
It's on.
And before you know, it's like it's off the table and you're just both just pushing at it back and forth. And it's whoever can just make the most noise and ruckus. And then finally, their head goes flying off.
That's awesome.
Those didn't last all that long either once you got a couple boys together.
Yeah, exactly. It probably lost its thrill after the first couple of bouts, right?
Well, yeah. And sometimes it did lead to actual fights between, the friends. because it's like, no, you shouldn't have won. That was a great toy.
So number 3 for me, you and other people might give me a little shit for this. My number 3 is, I just put video game console. Okay. Now, the reason I kind of made it broad is because I wanted to talk about the history of video games for me growing up.
Right, sure.
So the first console I had was probably the first one most kids in our age demographic had, and that was Pong.
Right, the Atari.
Well, no, Pong. No? Specifically a Pong console. It wasn't Atari really? At that time. It was literally a console. The only thing that it played was Pong. There were no cartridges. It was a Pong console. And that was originally released in November of 1972. I didn't get it until a few years later. I was probably 7 or 8 when I got it. So figure 76, 77. Right. And I remember being so blown away that I am playing a game on my television.
Yes. My best friend had that. And it was just amazing that how is my television?
I'm interacting with my TV. This is crazy.
With the way I move.
Yeah. And then there were variations where you could push a button on the controller, and when the ball, came to your paddle, you could hold the ball for a second and then redirect it or something.
Yeah, we could try to spin it.
Yeah, you could put a little English on it.
The knob real fast.
Exactly. The Atari 2600 came out a few years after that. Atari 2600 was the first video game console that I remember after Pong. There might have been something else, but I think that was the first one. Released in September of 1977. And I think that became super popular because of Pac-Man. Pac-Man was a big cultural phenomenon in arcades.
Oh, yeah.
Arcades, convenience stores, really any place that you could fit a Pac-Man game, and you wanted to make like a lot of money with people pumping quarters into it.
Every movie theater would try to jam somewhere.
It was nuts. And then when the Atari 2600 came out with a version of Pac-Man for it was not nearly as good as the arcade version. It was terrible, but everybody was psyched that they were able to play Pac-Man at home. It was like the amazing thing. So it was a few years after it first came out that my brother and I got the Atari 2600. Atari made their own games, but then there were other companies that made games for it, and the best one was Activision, and they had some cool games, and one of them was called Pitfall, and Pitfall came out after Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it exploited the popularity of that, because you were this this character, I think his name was Pitfall Harry, and you would go, I mean, it was a real simple game, but for whatever reason, I can't even tell you how many hours I spent playing Pitfall. It was just amazing. So what's your number 2? Number
2 is Super Toe Field Goal Kicker.
What the hell is that?
Really? You don't know what that is?
I might. I just don't remember it by name. Explain.
Okay. Basically, it was a little plastic field goal kicker. It was a little plastic guy, maybe, 8-10 inches tall. And you would smack the top of his head, and his foot would kick.
I had that.
Yes.
That was awesome.
It was crazy, awesome fun.
And you set up a goalpost, a few feet away or whatever, right?
Right. And like the whole thing with the Rock'em Sock'em robots, I got it, and I'm playing in my basement, and I tap his head. It came with a little tape measure that you could measure out to where you put the field goal. And it's like, 10 points. Ooh, yeah. And I'm hitting, and it's great. And then my cousin comes over, and he brought his, and I'm got mine set up for whatever, 10 feet. And he's like, no, come on. And he sets his up like 40 feet away, the whole length of the basement. And he friggin' runs, and he smacks the crap out of the top of it, and the ball goes flying. And I'm like, you can hit it that hard? He's like, yeah. So I move mine, and we're hitting these heads, with our full fists and everything. And I'm like, wait a minute. And my father had a little workshop in the basement. So I go in the workshop, and we're taking out planks of wood. So now we're starting to bang the head of the thing with the planks of wood, and the ball's flying all over the place. And then it's like, all right, well, we're not getting enough air. So now let's put it up on the table. So there's a table in the basement, and then for some reason somehow we got hold of an old wooden tennis racket, and we're using that and bapping the heads of these things. Well, needless to say, that didn't go on very long.
Yeah, before it broke.
Something broke inside.
Yeah.
So then we spent the rest of the afternoon opening them up and trying to figure out if we could glue together these little plastic pieces inside. That didn't last, but thankfully my birthday is less than 2 weeks after Christmas. So I asked for the soccer player one.
Okay.
Which was the exact same thing, except instead of kicking with his toe, he kicked with a sidestep. you didn't get much air on that. So then I started building like little ramps for the guy to be on so that he was kind of facing up in the air, but then the balls would roll back. So then I'm like coming up with all these little devices to hold the ball in place, and it was a mess, but just had a lot of fun. And that's, again, a toy that we went around to other kids' houses, and it became not just shooting field goals. It was trying to get into things. So.
Which proves a point that to young boys, everything becomes a weapon or a projectile eventually.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, definitely. And also, it gets you outside and doing stuff, but nothing takes the place of taking a toy and trying to make it better.
Yeah, absolutely.
So your 2, what was that?
Number 2 for me, this could have been number 1 for me, but when I get to number 1, I'll explain why I chose that as number 1. So number 2 for me is the Evel Knievel stunt cycle.
Yes!
Yes!
The one where you revved it up, right?
Yes!
Yes! That almost made my list, but I never owned it.
Oh, man.
I'm so jealous. I'm so envious of you.
Let me tell you something
about it, please.
This toy had such an impact on me that they were making them again a few years back. I saw them advertised somewhere, and I'm like, I got to get this for my nephew. I bought it for him when he was, I want to say, around the same age I was when I had mine, and I'm like, he's got to love this, right?
Yeah.
So I give it to him for Christmas. He opens it up and doesn't seem all that enthusiastic. You know, I was on the floor with that thing.
Yeah.
And I set him and my niece up, who's 3 years younger, on the floor. I set up a ramp. I had Evel Knievel jumping over them. I was like totally into it.
So then did he get into it once he saw
I don't know
that you can make things fly?
Kids grow up nowadays. It's such a shame. They grow up nowadays, and if it's not electronic, they don't give a shit. They want it to have blips and people killing each other or whatever. And I know I sound like an old geezer when I talk like that, but I feel like kids just don't have the same sort of enthusiasm for things where you have to use your imagination a little more, or if it's not, like I said, if it's not electronic, they don't care, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I've seen that, and I do feel they're missing out on something. I mean, how can you not be excited about this thing that the faster you rev it,
the faster
it's your energy you're putting into this thing, and then it takes off and it can fly.
Yeah, it's a little thing. You crank it up real as fast as you can, then you release it, and then it goes. Maybe it does a wheelie. You hit a ramp, it jumps over stuff, it crashes. It's amazing. And Evel Knievel was like the coolest dude in the world when we were kids.
Oh, absolutely.
He jumped over the fountains at Caesar's Palace. He jumped over sharks. He jumped over
buses,
cars. Just nuts. I mean, he was featured on ABC's Wide World of Sports, for crying out loud.
Oh, yeah.
Evel Knievel was the coolest. I mean, he wore those great white jumpsuits with the cape and the stars and stripes. Red, white, and blue.
All American, baby.
And he rode Harley Davidson motorcycles. He was a badass. You know, he broke like 40 bones in his lifetime. He was a nut. What was your number 1 toy?
All right. My number 1 is Hot Wheels.
Okay.
Now, I know not exciting.
No, it's cool.
But I got to tell you, first of all, I played with Hot Wheels for at least 10, 11 years.
Okay.
There's pictures of me as a toddler with the Hot Wheels in my mouth. And as I grew, the way I played with Hot Wheels grew. And, you know, my circle of friends.
Okay.
It all kind of grew. And it would start off with, okay, we got the Hot Wheels. And now, you know, we're toddlers. So we're just pushing our Hot Wheels against each other. And there's our race. And now we're getting older. Now we need the tracks. So now we got the racetracks. I don't want to push it. I want to set it up high so it goes down on its own speed, down a ramp. Okay, so we're doing that. And it's like, well, wait, but now we have to make it fly. So we'll make a ramp at the bottom. Then they started selling ramps. It's like, okay, now we got to go down the ramp. And we're measuring how far it can go. And we don't have to push it. We don't have to nothing. And it's not breaking. This is great. And then, all right, well, then they make the loop-de-loop. Holy shit, now we got a loop-de-loop. So we push it down and get the loop-de-loop. Then they started with the track with like the spinning things that you pushed it through, and the car would go through these 2 spinning drums, and it would push it out like a baseball pitching machine.
And then I remember they had things that you loaded with rubber bands.
Yes.
That you would launch the cars with. And then depending on how many rubber bands you use or the thickness of the rubber bands would determine how fast your car went. So,
yeah, but then those became a problem because then, of course, we're trying to load it up with like 100 rubber bands. And then the plastic parts to it start bending, and it's little plastic tabs and things, so they're bending and breaking off.
Not to mention, if you tried to make the car go too fast, it would fly right off the track. It wouldn't work, or the track would come undone. It was, it was always something.
Yeah, the last time we had a huge playing with the Hot Wheels, I lived in Wyckoff, like on the side of a hill, and between myself and my other friends, we probably had like 100 lengths of track, and we just built like 2 ramps going up this hill. The street was a hill, and not only were we just first racing the cars side by side, then somebody had the great idea, we should race our bikes down this hill against the cars and see which is faster. And then somebody thought, wait a minute, let me get my skateboard. And before you know it, there's like somebody laying down on the ground with a broken arm.
Yeah.
The Hot Wheels was something that just grew with me as I became older and more experimental and dangerous.
Yeah. Some kids had train sets. Hot Wheels were where it was at, though. They were very cool.
Hot Wheels was it. So what was your one?
My number one, and maybe a little controversial because, you may go, well, is that really a toy?
Oh,
but I had to put it. Number one for me was my first bicycle.
Oh.
And the reason that I chose this, because Evel Knievel Stunt Cycle was going to be number one for me, but then I thought about the first bicycle and what it meant to me when I was a kid, and even getting it on Christmas. And I have a funny story for when I got my first bicycle. When I say my first bicycle, not like a tricycle. Obviously when we're all toddlers, we have the tricycle. But this is my first bike. My first bike looked like Evel Knievel's motorcycle.
Oh,
it was
how
white.
Great is that? Yeah.
White with the stars and stripes. It had like a 76 plate in the front underneath the handlebars, like a real like motocross kind of vibe.
Yeah.
But I remember Christmas morning that I got the bike. My brother and I both got a bike that year for Christmas, and my brother got his first. And, my father had put the bikes together, but he didn't wrap them because wrapping a bike is probably like a nightmare. Right. So what he did was he had them in another room. Like, we had other presents. We opened the other presents. Oh, there's one more thing. And every year when I watch A Christmas Story and Ralphie, the BB gun, and how the BB gun is like behind the desk. Separate
what's
from everything
that
else.
over there?
Yeah, what's that over there? Exactly. Well, my father did the same thing with the bikes.
Cool.
My brother got his first. He's like, cool, a bike, man. This is amazing. And I was like, he got a bike? I didn't get a bike? And then my dad's like, well, why don't you look over there? And the front tire of the bike was kind of peeking out through like the cover or whatever. I'm like, you got him a full bike and I only got a tire? What? So he's like, no, there's a bike over there. So I go over there and I get the bike. Getting your first bike when you were a kid, at least for me, was the greatest thing ever. I mean, I don't know if kids feel the same way about bikes now. Probably not, because it's not electronic.
Yeah, maybe.
And then I remember I had training wheels. I had never ridden a bike before. I don't know how to ride a bike. So, you're learning on training wheels. And then you go from 2 training wheels to 1 training wheel, and you start to get your balance that way a little bit. And your dad's helping you. He's pushing you and all that. And then eventually you take off that second training wheel, and it's like, go for it. And you try and figure it out. And I have a very distinct memory of riding. There was a side street next to where I lived in Wayne called Doremus Lane. I could ride my bike on that street because there wasn't a lot of traffic, so you didn't have to worry about getting hit by a car.
Okay, good.
But I remember riding my bike on that street, and, I was still new to no training wheels, and I remember wiping out on the side of the... I didn't get hurt bad, but, you get like a skin knee or whatever. But I remember as I wiped out, a car came, and the people were like, are you okay? And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm okay. But I just remember a distinct memory of falling and getting back on the bike,
No, that's cool. And when you said your first bike, I went, because that memory, for me, coming down the stairs and at Christmas morning, seeing my dad was just sitting on the sofa, and right in front of him was this red bike with spider handlebars and the banana seat.
Yep.
And I was just like, I had no idea I'd be getting anything like that.
Yeah.
That pulls at the heartstrings.
And then when you're a kid, back in the 70s, and you have a bike, that opens up freedom. Oh my God. It opens up a whole new world of possibilities for getting together with your friends. Exactly.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
And that was the thing back then. And again, we're going to sound like old men when we talk like this, but you would ride your bike with your friends, and you would go on little adventures, kind of like the Goonies,
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes there'd be little arguments because we'd all be riding, and then we got to like Goffle Road.
Yes.
And somebody would say,
"Oh, we better turn
I'm
back.
not supposed to go any further."
Right.
And we're like, "Come on, you wussy, come on." And that's a 70s word, wussy.
Wussy, yep.
Know?
You'd get together with your friends, you'd ride around, you'd go to places and have little adventures, and you knew that, once it started to get a little dark, time to start heading home. And your parents
we didn't have
cool.
cell phones. We lived by the sun.
Yep. I just feel bad for kids. They just don't have the same experiences we had growing up. We had great times when we were kids. It's definitely a different world nowadays in so many ways, but hopefully there's still some kids out there that can appreciate the joy of riding bikes with their friends and exploring.
Yeah. Do we want to do any honorable mentions?
Absolutely.
Light Bright.
Okay.
Creative and fun.
Uh-huh.
Star Wars PlayStation.
Probably something that was shaped like the Death Star, and you use the Star Wars action figures from Kenner in it, right?
Right. It's basically a 2-story plastic thing that was very basic, kind of like, the bridge of the Death Star. And you just played with your figures. There was the little walkway where Luke got his hand chopped off and Darth Vader said, "I'm your father," and all that stuff.
Spoiler alert.
So, yeah. Oh, spoiler. Yeah. How many years later?
I know, I'm
40
kidding.
years later. Viewmaster.
Oh, yeah. I had Viewmasters.
Okay. And then I started getting into some games, like Operation and Kerplunk. Mm-hmm. So that's where I am.
Honorable mentions for me, Spirograph.
Oh, yes.
Which was another creative toy.
Very cool, yeah.
And I found out that was one of Sue's favorite toys growing up. So I got her one of those for Christmas this year. Because she's super into coloring now.
Right, yeah.
Which is a big thing for a lot of adults that want to relax. It's very relaxing.
Kathy's got a few of those coloring books around.
Yeah, exactly. And I felt like, well, Spirograph will be like the next best thing. Not only can you make your own artwork, then you can color that artwork. So
right.
And she's actually done that. So it's kind of cool. And that was a fun toy. I also had Hot Wheels as an honorable mention. So you mentioned that as one of your top 5. Another creative toy that I had on the honorable mention list, Tinker Toys.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Tinker Toys were very similar to Lincoln Logs, except they were little round things that you would put sticks into and build.
Yeah, right.
And then another thing that's not really a toy, but was a huge part of my childhood, baseball cards.
Oh,
baseball cards were huge for me.
With that awesome gum in it.
Oh, my God. Well, this has been fun.
This has been a good talk.
Yeah.
This is a fun subject.
Yeah, I think we came up with some good choices.
It was a wonderful exercise just going through and digging out, some just memories that came back.
I totally forgot about that field goal kicker thing that you had in your list.
Well, your face just lit up.
Oh, man, I loved it. It was amazing. Are you kidding me? But the ones that I put in my top 5 were the ones that really definitely had the most impact on me.
No, me too.
Well, thanks for joining us. We always want to hear from you. We want to know what your top 5 toys of childhood were.
And I want to hear like a 90-year-old saying, "I had a stick and a rock."
I used to hit a hula hoop down the street with a stick. A tire.
If I didn't wake up with erection, I didn't have anything to play with.
And right now, we take it to the dark place.
Rodney Dangerfield.
Hey, I'll tell you. So send your top 5 toys to rankingpodcast@yahoo.com or tweet @JasonDavisVoice. And remember, the Ranking Things podcast is a production of Jason Davis Voiceover. Again, please visit jasondavisvoice.com if you need a voiceover for a commercial, internet or corporate video, e-learning, phone message, and more. Again, my name is Jason Davis.
And I'm Eric Wright.
Thanks so much for joining us and for listening to the Ranking Things podcast. We will talk again soon.
Later.